Hi there, this is Professor Juris, and welcome to my new series, Developing an Artistic Aesthetic. And in this series, what we're going to be trying to do is help you to develop your photographic vision and to find your photographic calling. So, two of the things that we're going to look at in this first episode is going to be making a photograph versus taking a photograph. So I thought I'd start with this image here because definitely a made photograph, not just a taken photograph. I usually don't just walk around with an axe unless I'm out in the woods, but for this photograph I actually created it. And I'm not going to get into the background behind the photograph or my theories for making the photograph, etc., my reasons, but just talk a little bit about maybe the photograph. I shot this with a Hasselblad camera on a tripod, and you can see that I have the cable release in my hand. It's a black and white negative. I printed it out. Then what I did is I actually scanned it into Photoshop and added all the scratch marks to it and so forth, and maybe did a little burning around the edges of the photograph up here, and that's it as far as like creating it. So I would consider this to be a very successful art photograph. It's been in many shows, and it also, if we had to classify it, it would be kind of classified as a psychological photograph where um, its purpose is that it was made for was to challenge the viewer. So that's like a category of itself, is if you make photographs to challenge the viewer, and we're going to look at another one coming up here that was made by one of my students. But the point that we want to just stay with right at this point is that this is a photograph that I made or that I created. Um, it's not just a snapshot of something that you've taken like a documentary photograph. So it's actually a photograph that was put together. I thought this up um, and then pulled it off. I went ahead in the studio and set everything up and shot the photograph. So it was an idea that translated into this. Now, when I made this photograph, little did I know that it would be the starting point for my MFA thesis show that I made called Portraits of the Dark Lodge, or Portraits from the Dark Lodge. And so this was the point of departure for the MFA show that I completed at Ohio State University. And we will have a whole episode, I think, devoted to that show and show you most of the images that were on exhibition there at Ohio State. So this was taken originally just as an individual photograph, and it turned into that series. But looking at it as an individual photograph, and that's the way you should actually look at all photographs that you make. So they can be part of a series, but each photograph should be equally successful. That's very important when you're looking at photographs. So let's say that you had a theme that you were photographing. Every photograph that's in the series should be just as strong as the other one if it's successful. And you'll have some certainly that are more successful than others, but in order to create a really successful theme, you want to have all the photographs in there to be very strong. So how do I know this photograph is a strong photograph? Well, I actually had this photograph hanging up in the photo lab for many years, and one of the things that my boss told me was that she was teaching Photo 1, is that a lot of the Photo 1 students were afraid to take Photo 2 with me because they were afraid of me after they had saw this photograph. Who is this person with this axe? This crazy man. I certainly don't look like your common everyday churchgoer. that I am in this photograph. Um, I look something different, like something different, and that was kind of the point too of the Dark Lodge photographs, was that I took ordinary people, and I photographed them holding objects like this axe. And it was kind of funny. One of the things about the series was that if you take a person, off the street and you put them in a photograph and they're wearing a business suit or something, and then you tell them to hold this axe, you see this kind of this twinkle in their eye, and they become like a different person. So photographs can be lies. That's one of the things that we talked a lot about at Ohio State in Image Makers Workshop. And you're the actual creator, so you need to think of your photographs in a sense as making a movie. It's a mini movie still. Um, and in making a mini movie still, you want to be responsible for everything. You're responsible for the clothing, the lighting, the subject matter, whatever you're putting together. And so all those little things combined is what make a great photograph. So let's take a look at another artist that's very successful, and I do mean very successful, but he also really is an incredible artist for the amount of work that he puts into his work. So this artist is Gregory Crutzen, and he was a faculty member at Yale University for a long time. I'm not sure if he's still there or if he retired, but he is a very successful artistic photographer. He has his work in all major collections and museums and everything. And here's his name right up here. If you can see this up at the very top, I left it in there so you could spell it and you could look at it and go to his website and look at a lot more of his work. We're only going to look at this one photograph at this time because I'll tell you a little bit of the story behind this photograph when I first saw it. I think it was on the cover of a photo magazine, and I thought, wow. And looking at this model floating in water, I thought that, this was right about the time I think that when I saw it that they had the floods down in New Orleans, and I thought maybe he went down there and got a model and went into one of the flooded houses and took the picture. And I thought even that was pretty amazing to find this house and set all this up. But it goes far beyond that. Gregory actually did this in a studio and had carpenters build the house, build this room um, totally, and make the furniture in place and everything, and then flooded the room with water, and then had the model in there. And he has actually a large photography crew that works with him on doing this and building all this and setting this up, and he shoots with an 8x10 view camera, so this was on 8x10 color film, and it's just a gorgeous image. But what my point about this photograph that I think is very important again is that it's a made photograph. It's not just taking a photograph. He didn't just go outside and point the camera at some trees without doing anything and snapping off the picture. Um, you know that that's people. A lot of people do landscape photography, and landscape photography is fine, but um, really hard, I think, to become notable these days. Um, if you're trying to become a successful artist, if you're just photographing landscapes, there has to be something different about your landscapes. Something unique, something really compelling. The days of taking landscapes like Ansel Adams did is probably far gone today. And it's amazing, I think also that if you look on the internet at different photographers, you could just Google photography and start looking at photography. And that's where you should probably start to narrow it down, the kind of photography that you're interested in. Because in developing your own personal aesthetic, one of the things that you want to do is to think about what you personally like, what you personally are into. So since I started talking a little bit about landscapes, I wanted to jump to this photograph, and it's maybe a seascape, you might call it. But the question I think to ask yourself then is this photograph art? It's not a picture of just the beach. I had my dog go there and stand, and it's on the level of being art, and certainly a lot of people consider it art. I'm not sure if I consider it high art. To me, it's more of a documentary of my late dog Maya. And I truly love this photograph, and a lot of people have bought this photograph and have this photograph hanging up in different places. And if you like dogs, I mean, it's a great photograph. So, but I don't think that it pushes into the same realm as the self-portrait that I did earlier that I showed you. Perhaps you could categorize this photograph as beauty. Some of the things that I liked about it is, the footprints in the sand here and the texture in the sand from the lighting, and all those things go together to make a great photograph. But another category that this photograph kind of falls into is maybe documentary photography, because or portrait photography, portrait of a dog, um, you know, documentary because it's documenting the life of Maya and the places that she traveled to. So it can fall into a number of different categories as we look at it. So getting back to the topic again of making a photograph, this is a photograph that was taken by one of the better students I had over the years at Sinclair. This person right here, Nick Arnold. Um, Nick and his wife Ashley run the Blue House Gallery over in Dayton, and they both also teach at the University of Dayton. And if you look at this photograph, it's definitely I wouldn't think it's a documentary type of photograph unless they were just getting ready to make some soup. They had their pig head here, and I think that might be a cow head that they have in the photograph, and they could be ready to cook up soup. Or is it a photograph that's made for reaction? Is it a photograph that's made to challenge the audience? It definitely makes you think. If you would see this as a 30 by 40 print hanging on the wall and you walked into a gallery, it would definitely draw your attention, and it would definitely draw some kind of reaction. It's one of those photographs that you either love it or you hate it. You might want to stare and look at it for a while, and some other people might look at it and turn right away and have some objection with it. So it was created, I think, and I will have to talk to Nick about that, and maybe we'll do a little video clip with him talking about this in one of the episodes. But um, I think it was created to get that attention, to draw that action out from the viewer that's looking at it. So this is another photograph of mine. This was shot with a 4x5 view camera. Um, and I would say right around 1984 in Youngstown, Ohio. This is actually taken in Mill Creek Park, and it's taken, pretty much right behind where this person lived. That I took the photograph of him there, and there was a series of artists that were actually working with these paper bags at the time. So that was my point of departure for this, and putting it out by this old restroom in the woods, I thought was maybe a little bit creepy or eerie. Um, and again, it was probably made so that it would get some attention or get some reaction from the viewer. So that was the aesthetic behind making this photograph, and that was the aesthetic, I think, for a long time behind a lot of the work that I made. That was made to create a reaction from the viewer. The two topics that I probably worked with the most was getting a reaction from the viewer, and then simply beauty. Um, I loved photographing beauty for a long time, and we'll look at some of those images in another episode. So getting back to the point about making a photograph, this photograph was definitely made. I took the person here, I took this sheet there, I took the paper bag and made a kind of like a mask out of it, and then I had the person stand there. The quality of light and everything is beautiful in this photograph. I actually print this in platinum too. This is just a brown toned image, but it's gorgeous as a platinum print. But if I took the person out of the photograph, then what do I have? Then I simply, would have a document of this restroom out in the woods. I mean, you could say that somebody might find that to be beautiful, but it's certainly interesting, the old buildings that they built out in the woods. But so it would be a documentary photograph, and I wouldn't at that point call it high art anymore. The way that the photograph sits right now, I would call it high art, and I would feel comfortable entering this in any type of exhibition, any type of art exhibition, and it would probably do fairly well, I would think. So now that I've showed you some of the basic photographs that I've made and other people have made, that they actually make a photograph and create a photograph, I'll show you some that um, and try to give you the idea of what's not making a photograph or what's really not high art in my mind. And again, you probably might have your own opinion, and you're certainly welcome to that. In the art world, all opinions can go okay, but in the class, when you're in a photographic class and you're being taught by an instructor, it's good to really listen and then to try to create your most artistic work. So the reason I picked these out is, and I actually stole these off the internet. These are not any of my students' work or not my work, but they're documentary photographs. But they're actually, what they are is they're catalog photographs. So these were actually taken off of a website where they were. You can see up here the little honey logo, that you could save money maybe by using honey to, if you were going to buy this gnome. But they what comes to mind is a number of students that I've had over the years that have just said that done something like this. They take this. I think I actually had a couple students that had gnomes, and here's a gnome on my couch in the living room. Here's a gnome out in my backyard. Here's my dad holding a gnome, and that was their the series that they created. And to me, it was not very creative. It, there was other things that I thought they could have done if they really were inspired or they were in love with the gnome. But I think maybe more they were searching for something that they could do that would be creative. I think that creativity can be taught to some extent, if the person that you're trying to teach is willing to listen and to absorb the knowledge that you want to give them. So, this is funny. I have this story, but I used to always tell a student, if they would show me a photograph, say, for example, of a guy standing out in the parking lot, and, you know, they thought it was cool or something, and maybe they wanted to use that as one of their final images, and I would say to them that, yeah, that's cool, but it would be even cooler, um, if that guy was holding a swordfish, in his hand out in the parking lot. Then what is this guy doing with a swordfish? So it's the creative ideas or the things that you kind of add and you bring in making a photograph. There's a lot different ways you could make this, use a gnome to make this photograph much more interesting. You could take it to a cemetery at night and have it standing on a gravestone and have a spotlight on it, and then get a fog machine rolling in fog around it. So um, you could make a photograph, make it creative, make it like scary, because gnomes are kind of creepy anyway. But if that's what you want to photograph, but there's whatever you choose to photograph, you should try to do it in the most highly creative manner, not just sticking it on the lawn or taking a snapshot of it. These are just snapshots, and again, these were just taken off the internet by a company that was selling these gnomes. And I wanted to show you because I think this is a poor example of artwork if you think that this is your good artwork. So I wanted to show you good and bad as far as making a photograph goes. So to kind of recapitulate some of the things that we've gone over in here is that in starting to find your personal vision, one of the things that you want to do is try to photograph something that you're interested in or something that you like a lot or even love, so that that will that will make you driven to want to take more photographs and want to spend more time putting the photographs together, um, and photographing and photographing and photographing. And that's what you really need to do if you want to be an artist. Now, even if you want to be a commercial photographer, having a creative eye and having a creative mind so that you can, do things more creatively is going to get you more jobs once people start seeing your work. So, not just doing the standard normal things. You can even look at this as far as like wedding photography goes. I had a very successful wedding business up in Youngstown, Ohio for a long time. And I was competing with photographers and charging just as much as them that had been in business for like 30 years and had big studios and so forth. But when people saw my work as compared to their work, um, they always usually signed the contract with me. And it was because my work was artistic in a sense that I posed everything. A lot of people, don't like posed wedding photographs. They like sort of a documentary type of photograph where the person just walks around and shoots what's going on during the wedding. And I never did that. Everything that I did was always, set up, and it took a lot more time, especially the bride and groom portraits. But that's something you can think about doing. So I hope that this little talk at least got your mind thinking about finding your own vision and getting you started to think about what you want to photograph as a theme, to create a whole body of work that can be related together in some way, and by making photographs, not taking photographs. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you on the next one.